The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval training facility as Commander Marcus Bradley stepped out of his black SUV. His polished boots clicked against the concrete as he walked toward the main building, his chest heavy with ribbons and medals that told stories of battles fought in distant lands. At 45, Bradley had earned every stripe on his uniform through blood, sweat, and an iron will that had never bent to anyone. The facility buzzed with activity as dozens of potential recruits moved through various training exercises. Bradley's sharp eyes scanned the crowd, automatically categorizing each person based on years of military experience. He could spot weakness from a mile away, and today's batch looked particularly disappointing. "Sir, the new recruits are assembled in Bay 7, reported Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes, falling into step beside him. She carried a thick folder containing personnel files and test scores. Bradley nodded curtly. "Any standouts in this group?" Hayes flipped through her papers. "Most are typical candidates. Strong physical scores, good academic records. There's one unusual case though." She paused, glancing at a particular file. "A young woman named Elena Vasquez. Her paperwork shows some interesting background, but, honestly sir, she looks like a strong wind could knock her over." They entered Bay 7, where 30 recruits stood at attention in perfect rows. Bradley's experienced gaze swept over them like a hawk studying prey. The men were exactly what he expected: broad shoulders, muscled frames, the kind of physical presence that screamed military potential. His attention moved to the handful of women in the group, each one clearly athletic and determined. Then, his eyes stopped on her. Elena Vasquez stood in the back row, barely 5 feet 4 inches tall with a slight frame that seemed almost fragile compared to the others around her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation ponytail, and her olive-toned skin had a softness that suggested she'd never seen real combat. She couldn't weigh more than 120 pounds soaking wet. Bradley felt his jaw tighten with irritation. In his mind, the military was no place for delicate flowers. He'd seen too many good soldiers die because someone wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or tough enough when it mattered most. The thought of this girl trying to keep up with Navy SEAL training struck him as not just foolish, but potentially dangerous to everyone around her. "Who approved her application?" Bradley muttered to Hayes, not taking his eyes off Elena. "Her test scores were exceptional, sir. Top 5% in tactical reasoning, navigation, and problem solving. Her psychological evaluation showed remarkable stress tolerance and leadership potential." Bradley snorted softly. "Paper scores don't stop bullets, Lieutenant Colonel. Look at her, she belongs in a classroom, not a battlefield." As if sensing his scrutiny, Elena's dark eyes met his across the room. There was something unsettling about her gaze, a steadiness that seemed out of place in someone so young and seemingly inexperienced. She didn't flinch or look away as most recruits would when faced with a superior officer's disapproval. Instead, she maintained eye contact with a quiet confidence that only irritated Bradley further. "Today we begin your evaluation process," Bradley announced, his voice carrying clearly across the bay. "Some of you think you have what it takes to be part of an elite military unit. Most of you are wrong. By the end of this week, half of you will wash out. By the end of the month, only a handful will remain." He began pacing in front of the group, his hands clasped behind his back. The modern military faces threats that require more than just muscle and bravado. We need operators who can think under pressure, adapt to impossible situations, and make split-second decisions that could save or cost lives. But, make no mistake, if you can't handle the physical demands, nothing else matters. His eyes found Elena again. "I see some faces here that make me question whether our recruitment standards have become too relaxed. Being smart isn't enough. Being determined isn't enough. When your team is pinned down by enemy fire and you need to carry a wounded comrade to safety, good intentions won't help if you lack the physical strength to get the job done." Elena's expression remained neutral, but Bradley caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Good, he thought. Let her understand what she's gotten herself into. "Your first evaluation begins in 1 hour," Bradley continued. "You'll be tested on basic combat scenarios, weapon handling, and emergency response. Those who fail to meet minimum standards will be removed from the program immediately. As the recruits dispersed to prepare, Bradley watched Elena walk away with measured steps. She moved with surprising grace for someone he'd already written off as inadequate. Something about her confident bearing nagged at him, but he pushed the feeling aside. He'd been in this business long enough to know that confidence without capability was just arrogance waiting to be humbled. "Sir," Hayes said quietly, "perhaps we should review her full file before making any final judgments. Her background information was classified above my clearance level." Bradley waved dismissively. "I don't care if she's the daughter of a 4-star general. Physics doesn't care about your connections or your test scores. When the bullets start flying, strength and speed keep you alive. Everything else is just paperwork." An hour later, the recruits assembled on the obstacle course. Bradley positioned himself at a vantage point where he could observe every aspect of their performance. The course was designed to push candidates to their limits: high walls to scale, heavy equipment to carry, precision targets to hit while moving at speed. The first group of male recruits attacked the course with predictable results. Most performed adequately, a few excelled, and several struggled with the more demanding obstacles. Bradley made notes on his clipboard, already forming opinions about who would advance and who would be sent home. When Elena's group was called forward, Bradley paid particular attention. She looked even smaller standing next to the starting line, dwarfed by the imposing obstacles ahead of her. Several of the male recruits exchanged glances and barely suppressed smiles, clearly thinking the same thing Bradley was. This was going to be over quickly. "Begin," shouted the course instructor. What happened next would challenge everything Commander Bradley thought he knew about evaluating military potential. As Elena moved toward the first obstacle, her slight frame seemed to transform. Where others relied on brute strength to muscle their way over barriers, she flowed like water, finding handholds and leverage points that others missed entirely. The first wall stood 12 feet high, smooth concrete designed to test upper body strength and climbing technique. The recruit ahead of Elena, a 6'2" former college football player, took 3 attempts to clear it, his bulk working against him as he struggled to find purchase on the narrow ledge at the top. Elena approached the wall at a run, leaped up to grab the ledge, and, in one fluid motion, pulled herself up and over with an efficiency that made it look effortless. Bradley blinked, certain he'd missed something. No one that small should be able to clear that obstacle so easily. But Elena was already moving to the next challenge, a series of heavy sandbags that needed to be carried across a 100-yard stretch of uneven terrain. Each bag weighed 60 pounds, nearly half her body weight. This was where her lack of physical mass would surely stop her progress. Instead of trying to muscle the bags like the others, Elena studied them for a moment, then hefted one onto her shoulders in a way that distributed the weight across her entire frame. She moved steadily across the terrain, her breathing controlled and her pace consistent. While larger recruits struggled and stumbled under the awkward weight, she navigated the course with mechanical precision. Bradley found himself leaning forward, his irritation slowly being replaced by something approaching curiosity. This wasn't what he'd expected at all. The obstacle course continued to reveal Elena's unexpected capabilities. At the rifle range, while other recruits struggled to maintain accuracy while fatigued from the physical challenges, Elena's shots grouped tightly around the bullseye with mechanical consistency. Her breathing remained controlled, her stance perfect despite having just completed the grueling carry exercise. Bradley moved closer to observe her technique. Years of experience had taught him to recognize natural shooters, and Elena displayed the kind of instinctive marksmanship that couldn't be taught. Her grip was textbook perfect, her trigger control smooth and deliberate. Each shot seemed to flow naturally from the last, without the hesitation or overthinking that plagued many recruits. "Impressive shooting," commented Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, the range instructor. "She's put 15 rounds in a 3-inch group at 200 yards. That's better than most of our veteran marksmen manage on a good day." Bradley grunted acknowledgement but didn't voice his thoughts. Good shooting was certainly valuable, but it didn't address his fundamental concerns about her physical limitations. In real combat situations, marksmanship was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The next phase of evaluation moved to hand-to-hand combat scenarios. This was where Bradley expected Elena's performance to finally match his preconceptions. The exercise paired recruits for basic defensive tactics, with instructors observing their ability to apply taught techniques under pressure. Elena was matched against Thompson, a former Marine who outweighed her by nearly 80 pounds. Bradley watched with grim satisfaction, certain that this would finally expose the futility of placing someone so physically overmatched in a combat role. Real warfare didn't care about feelings or equal opportunity, it was brutally honest about the advantages of size and strength. The instructor called for the exercise to begin. Thompson moved forward with confidence, clearly expecting to overwhelm his smaller opponent through sheer physical presence. He reached for Elena with the kind of straightforward approach that had probably worked well for him in previous encounters with smaller opponents. What followed happened so quickly that Bradley almost missed the crucial details. Elena shifted slightly to one side, redirected Thompson's forward momentum, and, suddenly, the larger man was airborne. He hit the mat hard, the breath knocked out of him in a sharp gasp that echoed across the training area. Thompson scrambled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and confusion. "Lucky shot," he muttered, moving in more carefully this time. Elena remained perfectly calm, her stance balanced and ready. When Thompson tried a different approach, attempting to use his reach advantage to grab her, she seemed to anticipate his movement before he'd fully committed to it. Her response was precise and minimal, a subtle step, a redirect of force, and Thompson found himself off balance and vulnerable to a counterattack that Elena could have pressed but chose not to. After 3 more attempts, each ending with Thompson on the mat, the instructor called an end to the exercise. Thompson looked bewildered and frustrated, unable to understand how someone half his size had neutralized every advantage he thought he possessed. Bradley felt his assumptions beginning to crack. Elena's performance suggested training far beyond what any civilian should possess. Her movements had the fluid efficiency of someone who'd spent years perfecting these techniques, not someone learning them for the first time. "Where did she train before this?" Bradley asked Hayes quietly. Hayes consulted her notes. According to her application, she has no formal military background. Some martial arts training in college, but nothing extensive. That made no sense. Bradley had seen enough combat veterans to recognize advanced training when he saw it. Elena's techniques weren't the fumbling attempts of someone learning basic self-defense, they were the refined movements of someone who'd practiced these skills until they became instinctive. The afternoon evaluation moved to tactical problem-solving exercises. Recruits were presented with scenarios requiring quick thinking under pressure, defusing mock explosive devices, navigating through simulated hostile territory, coordinating team movements in complex environments. Elena's performance in these mental challenges was even more impressive than her physical capabilities. She approached each problem with methodical analysis, identifying key factors and potential solutions with the kind of strategic thinking that typically took years to develop. When working in team scenarios, she naturally fell into leadership roles, coordinating her teammates' actions with quiet efficiency. During one particularly complex exercise involving a simulated hostage rescue, Elena demonstrated an understanding of tactical principles that surprised even Bradley. She identified security weaknesses, calculated optimal approach routes, and coordinated her team's movement with the precision of an experienced operator. "How does she know about overlapping fields of fire?" Bradley muttered to himself as he watched Elena position her teammates to cover all potential escape routes. The exercise reached its climax when the team encountered an unexpected complication, additional hostiles appearing from a direction they hadn't anticipated. While other teams had struggled with similar surprise developments, Elena adapted instantly, redirecting her teammates and modifying their approach without losing momentum or focus. Bradley found himself studying Elena with new eyes. Everything about her performance suggested experience and training that didn't match her official background. The way she moved, the tactical concepts she understood instinctively, the calm confidence under pressure, these weren't characteristics that developed naturally or through casual preparation. As the day's evaluations concluded, Bradley made a decision. He needed answers about who Elena Vasquez really was and where her capabilities came from. Her file might have been classified above Hayes' level, but Bradley had contacts who could access information that others couldn't. That evening, Bradley sat in his office making phone calls. His first contact was Colonel James Mitchell, an old friend who worked in military intelligence. If anyone could shed light on Elena's background, it would be Mitchell. "Marcus, good to hear from you," Mitchell's voice crackled through the secure phone line. "What can I do for you?" "I need background information on a recruit named Elena Vasquez. Her file shows no military experience, but her performance suggests otherwise. Something doesn't add up." There was a long pause on the other end. "What kind of performance are we talking about?" Bradley described the day's events, highlighting Elena's unexpected capabilities across multiple areas. As he spoke, he heard Mitchell's breathing change, becoming more focused and attentive. "Marcus," Mitchell said finally, "I need you to listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you is classified, and it doesn't leave this conversation. Elena Vasquez isn't just another recruit." Bradley felt his pulse quicken. "Go on." "She's a former CIA operative, specialized in deep cover operations. Her official record was scrubbed as part of her extraction from a long-term assignment. What you're seeing isn't natural talent, it's the result of some of the most advanced training our government provides." The revelation hit Bradley like a physical blow. Everything suddenly made sense: her combat skills, tactical knowledge, and unnatural calm under pressure. She wasn't a civilian trying to prove herself, she was a trained professional operating at a level that most military personnel never reached. "Why is she going through basic training if she's already qualified?" Bradley asked. "That's above my clearance level," Mitchell replied. "But I can tell you that her presence in your program isn't random. Someone with significant authority wanted her there, and they wanted her background kept hidden." Bradley ended the call with his mind racing. He'd spent the entire day underestimating someone who was probably more qualified than most of his instructors. Worse, he'd let his preconceptions about her appearance cloud his judgment in a way that could have serious consequences. The next morning brought new challenges, but Bradley approached them with a completely different perspective. He watched Elena with the respect due to a fellow professional, noting details he'd previously missed. Her seemingly effortless performance now made perfect sense. She wasn't trying to prove herself, she was simply demonstrating abilities she'd already mastered years ago. But questions remained. If Elena was already trained to levels far beyond what this program could teach her, why was she here? What was her real mission, and how did it relate to his training facility? Armed with knowledge of Elena's true background, Bradley began observing her interactions with other recruits more carefully. She maintained perfect cover, never displaying more skill than necessary and allowing others to assume her capabilities were simply natural talent combined with good training. During morning exercises, Bradley noticed how Elena subtly guided struggling teammates without drawing attention to herself. When recruit Johnson had trouble with rappelling techniques, she positioned herself nearby and demonstrated proper form through her own movements, allowing him to learn through observation rather than direct instruction. The revelation of her CIA background raised new concerns for Bradley. If Elena was operating under deep cover, there had to be a specific reason for her presence. Government operatives weren't placed in military training programs without clear objectives, and those objectives rarely aligned with standard training purposes. Bradley's suspicions grew when he observed Elena during downtime. While other recruits relaxed or studied training materials, she maintained a subtle but constant awareness of her surroundings. Her eyes tracked movement patterns, noted potential exits, and cataloged details that most people would overlook. These weren't conscious actions, they were the ingrained habits of someone trained in surveillance and counter-surveillance techniques. The third day of training brought advanced combat scenarios designed to test decision-making under extreme stress. Recruits were placed in mock urban warfare situations, complete with simulated enemy fire and time-sensitive objectives. Most candidates struggled with the overwhelming sensory input and complex tactical requirements. Elena moved through these scenarios with the fluid confidence of someone who'd faced similar situations in reality. She identified optimal cover positions instantly, anticipated enemy movement patterns, and coordinated team actions with an efficiency that impressed even the veteran instructors. During one particularly challenging exercise, Elena's team was tasked with extracting a high-value target from a hostile compound while under simulated sniper fire. The scenario was designed to be nearly impossible, intended to observe how recruits handled failure and maintained composure under overwhelming pressure. While other teams had attempted direct assault approaches that resulted in mission failure and simulated casualties, Elena studied the problem from multiple angles. She identified weaknesses in the enemy positions that the scenario designers hadn't intended to include, found approach routes that minimized exposure, and developed an extraction plan that succeeded where others had failed. Bradley watched in fascination as Elena guided her teammates through movements that seemed almost choreographed. She anticipated every defensive response, countered every tactical challenge, and completed the objective with zero simulated casualties. The instructors exchanged glances of amazement. No recruit group had ever successfully completed that particular scenario. "How did you identify the blind spot in the overwatch position?" asked Master Chief Petty Officer Williams, the lead instructor for urban combat scenarios. Elena's response was carefully measured. "I noticed the angle of shadows suggested a gap in their coverage. Standard positioning would create overlapping fields of fire, but the terrain forced them to adjust, which created the vulnerability." Williams nodded approvingly, but Bradley caught the subtle pause before Elena's answer. She was explaining her reasoning in terms that civilians might use, carefully avoiding the technical language that would reveal deeper training. That afternoon, Bradley made another decision that would prove crucial. Instead of continuing with standard evaluation procedures, he implemented an unexpected challenge, a live-fire exercise with real consequences. Recruits would face scenarios using actual ammunition and genuine tactical equipment. "This is unusual for basic evaluation," Hayes observed privately. "Are you sure this level of risk is warranted?" Bradley's jaw was set with determination. "If we have operatives embedded in our training program, I need to know their capabilities and limitations under genuine pressure. Simulated scenarios only reveal so much." The live-fire exercise took place in a specially designed facility that recreated urban combat environments with precision. Recruits were equipped with standard military firearms and given objectives that required actual marksmanship skills under stress conditions. Elena approached the exercise with the same calm professionalism she displayed throughout training. But Bradley was watching for something specific, reactions that would confirm his suspicions about her background. The first stage required precision shooting while moving through a complex course. Recruits had to engage multiple targets while navigating obstacles and dealing with simulated enemy fire from paintball weapons operated by instructors. Most recruits struggled with the transition from controlled range shooting to dynamic combat scenarios. Their accuracy declined significantly when forced to move and shoot simultaneously, and the stress of incoming fire disrupted their concentration. Elena moved through the course like she was following a familiar routine. Her shooting remained precise despite complex movement patterns, and she demonstrated tactical awareness that went far beyond civilian training. She used cover effectively, maintained communication with teammates, and engaged targets with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd performed similar operations countless times. But it was her response to an unexpected development that finally convinced Bradley of her true nature. During the exercise, one of the instructor's paintball weapons malfunctioned and began firing actual paintballs at dangerous velocities. What should have been harmless training rounds became genuinely hazardous projectiles. While other recruits dove for cover or froze in confusion, Elena instantly identified the threat and responded with lethal efficiency. She located the source of the dangerous fire, calculated the optimal response angle, and neutralized the threat with a precision shot that disabled the malfunctioning weapon without harming the instructor operating it. The entire sequence took less than 5 seconds. Elena's response was so swift and accurate that most observers didn't immediately understand what had happened. But Bradley saw every detail: the instant threat assessment, the calculated response, and the precise execution that could only come from extensive real-world experience. "Medical check on Instructor Davidson," Elena called out calmly, moving to assist the instructor who'd been operating the malfunctioning weapon. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to managing crisis situations. Davidson was shaken but uninjured, saved by Elena's precise shot that had disabled his weapon without causing him harm. As medical personnel attended to him, Bradley approached Elena with new respect and wariness. That was exceptional shooting under pressure, he said, studying her reaction carefully. Elena met his gaze steadily. Training kicked in. I'm glad no one was seriously hurt. But Bradley had seen the calculation in her eyes during those crucial seconds, the rapid assessment of threat levels, consideration of response options, and selection of the optimal solution. These weren't reflexes developed through civilian training or natural talent. They were the ingrained responses of someone who'd faced genuine life or death situations repeatedly. That evening, Bradley received a phone call that changed everything. Commander Bradley, this is Deputy Director Harrison from CIA Operations Division. I believe you have one of our people in your training program. Bradley's blood ran cold. A deputy director didn't make personal phone calls about minor matters. Sir, I assume you're referring to Elena Vasquez. I am. And I need to inform you that her presence in your facility serves a purpose beyond standard training evaluation. We have credible intelligence suggesting that your program has been compromised by hostile intelligence services. Elena is there to identify and neutralize the threat. The implications hit Bradley like a sledgehammer. His training facility, which he'd believed to be secure, was potentially compromised. Someone within his own organization might be working for foreign powers, and Elena was conducting a covert investigation while maintaining her cover as a recruit. What kind of compromise are we talking about? Bradley asked. Training methodologies, personnel files, operational procedures, information that could significantly damage national security if it reaches the wrong hands. Elena has been tracking the source, but recent developments suggest the situation is more urgent than we initially believed. Bradley felt his world shifting beneath him. Everything he'd observed over the past few days took on new meaning. Elena wasn't just maintaining cover as a trainee, she was conducting a complex intelligence operation while surrounded by potential threats. What do you need from me? Bradley asked. Continue treating her as a normal recruit. Don't alter her training schedule or draw attention to her status. But be prepared for the possibility that her investigation may expose threats within your own command structure. The call ended, leaving Bradley with the unsettling knowledge that his own facility had been penetrated by hostile intelligence and that one of his recruits was actually a CIA operative conducting a high-stakes investigation. Worse, he now had to consider the possibility that people he trusted might be working for foreign powers. As he prepared for the next day's training, Bradley realized that Elena's true test wasn't just about demonstrating her capabilities, it was about identifying threats that could compromise everything he'd spent his career building. The fourth day of training brought an atmosphere of tension that Bradley couldn't shake. Knowing that Elena was conducting a counterintelligence operation made him hyper-aware of every interaction, every conversation, and every detail that might reveal the security breach she was investigating. Bradley watched his staff with new suspicion. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who had been his trusted second-in-command for 3 years. Master Chief Williams, whose combat record was impeccable. Sergeant Rodriguez, who had trained hundreds of recruits with unwavering professionalism. Any of them could be the source of the intelligence leak that had brought CIA attention to his facility. Elena continued her performance as a trainee with perfect consistency. She participated in morning exercises, studied training materials, and interacted with fellow recruits without giving any indication of her true purpose. But Bradley now recognized the subtle signs of her ongoing investigation, the way she positioned herself to observe conversations, her careful attention to personnel movement patterns, and her methodical cataloging of facility procedures. During weapons maintenance training, Bradley noticed Elena paying particular attention to inventory procedures. While other recruits focused on learning proper cleaning techniques, she observed how equipment was logged, who had access to secure storage areas, and which personnel handled sensitive materials. Her questions appeared casual but systematically gathered information about security protocols. Instructor Rodriguez, Elena asked during a break, how often do you audit the advanced equipment storage? I'm curious about military inventory procedures. Rodriguez answered helpfully, explaining the monthly audit schedule and describing which personnel had access to different security levels. To casual observers, it seemed like normal curiosity from an eager recruit. Bradley recognized it as intelligence gathering disguised as innocent questions. The morning's advanced training scenario involved night operations using specialized equipment. Recruits were issued night vision goggles, advanced communication gear, and electronic surveillance devices that represented current military technology. Bradley realized that exposure to this equipment could provide valuable intelligence to hostile services. Elena's performance during the night exercise was flawless, but Bradley noticed her paying careful attention to which personnel handled equipment distribution and storage. She memorized serial numbers, observed handling procedures, and tracked who had access to the most sensitive devices. Her investigation was methodically documenting potential security vulnerabilities. Halfway through the exercise, Elena made a subtle gesture that caught Bradley's attention. She touched her ear in what appeared to be an adjustment of her communication headset, but Bradley recognized it as a signal. Someone was watching, and Elena had identified them. Following her nearly imperceptible gaze, Bradley spotted a figure observing from an elevated position that wasn't part of the official training oversight. The person was using night observation equipment to monitor the exercise without authorization. Elena had detected unauthorized surveillance of the training operation. Bradley felt his pulse accelerate. This was the first concrete evidence of the security breach that Elena was investigating. Someone was gathering intelligence on military training procedures and equipment, and they felt confident enough to conduct surveillance directly within the facility perimeter. Elena continued the exercise normally while maintaining awareness of the unauthorized observer. Her movements became subtly different, positioning herself to block certain sightlines, using natural cover to limit what the surveillance could observe, and quietly alerting her teammates to adjust their positions without explaining why. When the exercise concluded, the unauthorized observer had vanished. But Elena had gathered crucial intelligence about their position, equipment, and observation methods. The investigation was progressing, but it was also revealing that the security breach was more active and aggressive than anyone had initially suspected. Bradley intercepted Elena as recruits returned equipment to storage. "Ms. Vasquez, I need to speak with you privately about your performance evaluation," he said in a voice loud enough for others to hear. They walked to his office, maintaining the appearance of a routine instructor-recruit conference. Once the door closed, Bradley's demeanor changed completely. "I know who you are and why you're here," he said quietly. "And I just watched you identify unauthorized surveillance of our training operation." Elena's posture shifted slightly, dropping the submissive recruit persona and revealing the alert professionalism of an experienced operative. "The situation is more complex than initial intelligence suggested. The breach isn't just passive information gathering, they're conducting active surveillance of current operations." "Who are they?" Bradley asked. "Still determining that. But tonight's surveillance used advanced equipment and demonstrated detailed knowledge of our training schedule. This suggests someone with significant access to facility information is providing targeting intelligence to hostile operators." Bradley felt a chill run down his spine. The implications were staggering. Not only was someone within his organization selling secrets, but foreign operatives were now conducting surveillance operations within American military facilities. "What do you need from me?" Bradley asked. Elena considered carefully. "Tomorrow's training includes advanced tactical communications. I need you to implement a last-minute change to the exercise location. Don't tell anyone about the change until immediately before the exercise begins. I want to see who shows up at the original location." Bradley nodded grimly. The trap Elena was setting would force the security breach into the open, but it would also escalate the risk significantly. If hostile operatives were willing to conduct surveillance within the facility, they might be prepared for more aggressive action if they felt threatened. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. During the pre-dawn briefing, Bradley announced the location change for the tactical communications exercise. He watched his staff's reactions carefully, looking for signs of surprise or concern that might indicate who was passing information to unauthorized parties. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes frowned at the change. "Sir, the new location doesn't have the same communication infrastructure. We'll need to modify our equipment setup." Master Chief Williams nodded agreement. the terrain is also more challenging. Should we adjust the difficulty level for the recruits? Sergeant Rodriguez checked his notes. I'll need to coordinate with security for perimeter monitoring at the new location. All three responses seemed normal and appropriate. If one of them was the source of the intelligence leak, they were maintaining excellent cover. Elena participated in the morning briefing as a recruit would, asking no questions and offering no suggestions. But Bradley caught the subtle look she gave him. She was ready for whatever developed during the exercise. The tactical communications training took place in a remote section of the facility that offered natural concealment and multiple observation positions. If unauthorized surveillance attempted to monitor the exercise, Elena would have opportunities to detect and track them. As the exercise began, Bradley positioned himself where he could observe both the training activities and the surrounding terrain. Elena moved through the communications scenarios with professional competence, but her attention was clearly divided between training requirements and counter-surveillance activities. 30 minutes into the exercise, Elena's hand moved to her equipment belt in what appeared to be a routine adjustment. But Bradley recognized it as another signal. She had detected something significant. Through hand signals disguised as exercise communications, Elena indicated multiple observation positions around the training area. The unauthorized surveillance wasn't just present, it was comprehensive and well-coordinated. Foreign operatives were conducting a sophisticated intelligence-gathering operation against American military training. Bradley felt anger building alongside his concern. His facility, his people, and his mission were being compromised by hostile intelligence services operating with inside information. Someone he trusted was betraying everything he'd sworn to protect. The exercise continued normally, but Bradley was planning. Elena had identified the threat, but neutralizing it would require careful coordination. One mistake could expose Elena's true identity and compromise her entire operation. As recruits completed the communication scenarios, Bradley made a decision that would force the situation to its conclusion. Whatever developed next, he was determined to identify and stop the security breach that was threatening his facility and potentially endangering lives. The final confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. As the tactical communications exercise concluded, Elena made a hand signal that froze Bradley's blood. Immediate danger. The unauthorized surveillance had shifted from passive observation to active threat assessment. Bradley subtly moved closer to Elena as recruits gathered their equipment. Through their established signal system, she communicated that hostile operatives were converging on the training area. The intelligence-gathering operation had become something much more dangerous. All personnel, return to base facility immediately, Bradley announced, projecting calm authority while his mind raced through defensive options. Exercise concludes early due to weather conditions. As recruits began moving toward transport vehicles, Elena positioned herself near Bradley. 3 armed operatives moving to intercept positions, she said quietly. They're not just gathering intelligence anymore. Someone gave them orders to take direct action. Bradley felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. Foreign operatives were conducting an armed operation within his facility, and he had 30 recruits who could become casualties if the situation escalated. But Elena was trained for exactly this type of threat. What do you need? Bradley asked. Clear the area of non-combatants. Give me 3 minutes to neutralize the threat. And be prepared to deal with whoever provided them with intelligence support. As Bradley coordinated the retreat of recruits and support personnel, Elena seemed to transform before his eyes. The submissive trainee disappeared completely, replaced by a professional operative whose every movement radiated lethal competence. She moved toward the tree line where she detected the hostile surveillance, her approach invisible to anyone not trained in advanced reconnaissance techniques. Bradley watched through binoculars as Elena closed on positions that he couldn't even identify. What followed was a masterclass in single-operator tactics. Elena approached the first surveillance position with fluid precision, neutralizing the operative before he could raise an alarm. Her movements were swift, silent, and brutally effective. The second position proved more challenging. As Elena moved to engage, the operative detected her approach and attempted to radio a warning. But Elena had anticipated this possibility and jammed their communications using equipment she'd somehow acquired without Bradley's knowledge. The third operative, realizing that his teammates had been compromised, attempted to escape toward the facility perimeter. This was where Elena demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond normal CIA training. She pursued the fleeing operative across terrain that should have provided him significant advantages. But Elena moved like she had supernatural awareness of the landscape, anticipating his route and cutting off escape options with tactical precision that impressed even Bradley's experienced eye. The final confrontation was brief but decisive. Elena cornered the operative near the facility's outer fence and subdued him using techniques that Bradley had never seen before. Within 5 minutes of beginning her counter-operation, she had neutralized 3 armed hostiles and secured a prisoner for interrogation. As security teams arrived to secure the area, Elena returned to where Bradley waited. Her expression was calm and professional, showing no signs of the intense action she'd just completed. "Immediate threat neutralized," she reported. "But we still need to identify who provided them with facility intelligence." Bradley nodded grimly. The most dangerous part of the operation was just beginning. Exposing a security breach within his own command structure would require careful planning and precise execution. "I have an idea," Bradley said. "But it's going to require you to maintain your cover a little longer." Elena's plan was elegant in its simplicity. She would discover evidence of the security breach in a way that appeared accidental, allowing Bradley to investigate without revealing her true identity. But executing the plan required perfect timing and flawless performance. During the afternoon debrief session, Elena carefully guided the conversation toward security procedures. Her questions appeared naive but systematically exposed inconsistencies in official protocols versus actual practices. "I noticed that some personnel have access to areas that aren't listed in the orientation materials," Elena observed innocently. "Is that normal for security procedures?" Lieutenant Colonel Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "Security protocols are adjusted based on operational requirements. Some personnel need expanded access for efficiency purposes." Elena's follow-up questions revealed that Hayes had been granting unauthorized access to facility areas and information systems. Her modifications to standard security protocols had created the vulnerabilities that hostile intelligence services had exploited. "Sarah," Bradley said quietly, "I need to see you privately." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Hayes had been compromised through a combination of financial pressure and blackmail, gradually providing intelligence that seemed harmless individually but created a comprehensive picture of facility operations when combined. "I never intended for this to happen," Hayes said, her military bearing finally cracking under the weight of her betrayal. "They said they only wanted routine information, nothing that could endanger anyone." Bradley felt disappointment and anger warring within him. Hayes had been a trusted colleague whose weakness had endangered everyone under his command. But he also recognized that intelligence services were skilled at exploiting personal vulnerabilities to create assets within target organizations. "You're confined pending formal investigation," Bradley said. "Security teams will escort you to holding facilities." As Hayes was led away, Bradley realized that Elena's investigation had revealed vulnerabilities that went beyond simple information leaks. The hostile intelligence operation had been sophisticated and long-term, designed to gather comprehensive intelligence about American military capabilities and procedures. Elena approached as security teams finished securing the area. Her cover as a recruit was no longer necessary, and she moved with the confident bearing of a professional operative. "The immediate threats have been neutralized," she reported. "But this was part of a larger intelligence network. Your facility was one of several targets they were exploiting for information about advanced military training and equipment." Bradley nodded his understanding. "What happens next?" "Comprehensive security review, updated protocols, and expanded counterintelligence monitoring. Your facility was compromised, but it's also provided valuable intelligence about hostile operations targeting American military installations." As Elena prepared to leave the facility, Bradley reflected on the events of the past week. He began by dismissing her as physically inadequate for military service, allowing his preconceptions about size and strength to cloud his judgment about capability and experience. "I owe you an apology," Bradley said. "I let my assumptions interfere with proper evaluation of your abilities." Elena smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen from her. "Your initial reaction was understandable. My cover required people to underestimate me. But I hope this demonstrates why judging capabilities based on physical appearance can be dangerous." Bradley watched as Elena departed the facility, leaving behind a training environment that was more secure but fundamentally changed by her presence. The past week had taught him valuable lessons about the dangers of preconception and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to recognize true capability. The recruits who remained completed their training with enhanced security protocols and a deeper understanding of the complex threats facing modern military operations. But they never learned the true identity of the quiet woman who had briefly trained alongside them and whose presence had exposed and neutralized a significant threat to national security. As Bradley resumed his normal duties, he carried with him a newfound respect for the principle that had cost him dearly to learn: never underestimate anyone based on their appearance. True strength and capability often came in unexpected packages, and the most dangerous mistake a military professional could make was assuming that physical presence was the measure of operational effectiveness. Elena's brief time at the facility had demonstrated that the most powerful weapon in any conflict was the mind of a properly trained operative, regardless of their physical characteristics. It was a lesson that Bradley would carry forward through the rest of his career, and one that would fundamentally change how he evaluated potential and capability in others.